No, buddy, get out of the way. No. Hey guys, this is gonna be a pretty massive one. I just wanted to say before we get into it to stay tuned until the very end for an important message regarding the future of the show. Now, with that out of the way, let's roll that theme music.
This better be about the Zeta Project.
Hello, Watchtower Database, and welcome back to The Vanishing Point, the only YouTube show that dissects small chunks of the DCAU timeline to answer questions you probably never thought to ask. Ever since we started the show back in February of 2018, the whole point of The Vanishing Point has been to work out the small details in the DC animated universe in order to smooth out the kinks on the timeline. Whether it be our first episode on how old Virgil Hawkins was, our most popular episode on whether or not Jason Todd was ever Robin in this universe, or the last episode where we got to the bottom of the Batcave dinosaur mystery, the purpose has been to iron out all of the wrinkles. So now, here we are, a year and 10 months later, and I think it's about time we take a look at everything we've uncovered so far and see just how well it all lines up. So without further ado, I present to you the entire DCAU timeline. So far. At the beginning of time, the universe was created by the Big Blue Hand. Batman, Green Lantern, and Kronos witnessed this event during Justice League Unlimited's The Once and Future Thing, but effectively rewrite their presence out of the event via time travel shenanigans. Fast forward multiple millennium, and now we're in the year 1215, which, yes, is almost 800 years before Batman ever shows up, but there's a decent amount of early history that we've uncovered, so strap in. In 1215, in an attempt to make peace between King John of England and a group of rebel barons discontent with his reign, the Archbishop of Canterbury drafts the Magna Carta, the terms of which are agreed to on June 15th. On April 30th, 1789, George Washington becomes the first president of the United States of America and serves until March 4th, 1797. From our understanding, the presidential succession matches the real world up into the 20th century. But since we've yet to confirm this with 100% certainty, the next president we have evidence of is the third, Thomas Jefferson, who serves from March 4th, 1801 to March 4th, 1809. While Jefferson is in office, Napoleon becomes the Emperor of France. This lasts from May 18th, 1804 to April 6th, 1814. While Emperor, Napoleon also reigns as King of Italy between March 17th, 1805 and April 11th, 1814. After losing power, he briefly returns to the throne as Emperor of France for 3 months from March 20th, 1815 to June 22nd, 1815. December 19th, 1843, A Christmas Carol is published. 18 years later, on March 4th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln becomes the 16th President of the United States of America and serves until he dies on April 15th, 1865, following being shot by John Wilkes Booth at the Ford's Theater the evening prior. Hey? Jumping 40 years into the future, on September 14th, 1901, Theodore Roosevelt becomes the 26th President of the United States. I always get confused whether it's Roosevelt or Roosevelt on these, and I'm not gonna go look it up. As we stated earlier, it's not 100% confirmed that all of the presidents were the same, but it's worth noting that in the real world, Roosevelt's presidency began as a result of the assassination of William McKinley 6 months into his term. Moving up from vice president, Roosevelt ended up being popular enough to be elected a second term, serving until March 4th, 1909. 5 years later, in 1914, most Federal Reserve notes were first introduced. Being specific to what we know from the DCAU though, this is when the $100 bills with Benjamin Franklin's face begins circulation.
It's identical down to Ben Franklin's stubble.
On October 4th, 1927, construction begins on Mount Rushmore. Originally planned to feature George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln from head to waist, construction on the monument concludes October 31st, 1941 due to a lack of funding. In 1930, Fortune magazine begins publication, releasing their first issue in February. A few years later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes the 32nd president, taking office March 4th, 1933. Perhaps the most popular president of all time, except for in the eyes of business and financial monopoly and speculation and reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. FDR's policies, including the New Deal, win him a record 4 terms in office and become instrumental in America recovering from the Great Depression. Roosevelt serves until April 12th, 1945, when he dies of an intracerebral hemorrhage at the age of 63. On September 1st, 1939, World War II begins. For the first 2 years, America America sits on the sidelines but finally joins the war on December 7th, 1941, following the attack on Pearl Harbor. During the war, in 1944, the Germans develop a super soldier serum under the code name Project Captain Nazi. However, prior to testing, the operation is disrupted by a US operative who goes by the code name Spy Smasher. That same year, on June 6th, the Allied forces, with the assistance of time-traveling members of the Justice League, stormed the beaches of Normandy on what would come to be known as D-Day. Following the defeat of Vandal Savage, Hitler is reinstated as the leader of the Nazi troops. While the date isn't universally agreed upon, the war ended the following year. At the time, it was generally accepted that August 14th, 1945, Victory over Japan Day, was the end, but some scholars point to September 2nd, 1945, the day Japan formally surrendered. Speaking of 1945, this is the earliest that Amanda Waller could have been born. Ultimately, her date of birth is unclear and could have been anywhere from this point to 1963, though it seems very likely that it would have been sometime between 1952 to 1960. On March 17th, 1946, Charlie Collins from the episode Joker's Favor is born, and later that year on December 20th, It's a Wonderful Life premiered at the Globe Theater in New York. Of course, Charlie would come to find out that life gets a little bit less wonderful when you cuss out the Joker.
Ready to do me that little favor?
Currently, the 50s seem to be a pretty empty decade, with the only notable occurrence being the premiere of I Love Lucy on October 15th, 1951.
Honey, I'm home!
However, the 60s would prove to be just a bit more eventful. On January 20th, 1961, John F. Kennedy is inaugurated as the 35th President of the United States. Sometime between late 1961 up to 1963, Bruce Wayne is born to Thomas and Martha Wayne, and on November 22nd, 1963, JFK is assassinated. The official story pins the blame on Lee Harvey Oswald, but according to the question,
there was a magic bullet. It was forged by Illuminati mystics to prevent us from learning the truth.
2 years later, in 1965, Harvey Dent, Pamela Isley, and Harley Quinzel are all born. At the age of 6, sometime between late 1967 to mid-1970, Bruce Wayne first discovers the Batcave, which we see occur via flashback in Batman Adventures number 35. On April 3rd, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. delivers a speech at the Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee, that would later be quoted by Jessica Cruz. The following year, on January 20th, 1969, Richard Nixon takes office as the 37th president. Either this December or the one in 1970 or the one in 1971, Thomas and Martha Wayne are murdered at the hands of a gunman who may have been Joe Chill, but certainly wasn't the Joker. And while we're at it, it actually may not have been December, seeing as in this book, it says that it happened on June 26th. My birthday. In 1972, Spectra Studios, the studio behind production of The Grey Ghost, burns down in a fire, and as a result, the show is taken out of circulation. That year also would see the beginnings of the Watergate Scandal, when 5 men break into the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate office building in Washington, D.C. on June 17th. After a 2-year ordeal, this leads to the resignation of Richard Nixon on August 9th, 1974, who is then followed by Gerald Ford. Also in 1974, Congress passes the Speedy Trial Act. Shortly afterward, Barbara Gordon is born in either 1975 or 1976. In 1977, women are finally accepted into the Rhodes Scholarship Program, with Amanda Waller being an early recipient. And on January 20th that year, Gerald Ford passes on the office of the presidency to Jimmy Carter. Ending off our time in the 70s, Bruce Wayne leaves Gotham for training at the age of 18, sometime between 1979 to 1981. Now in the 80s, Bruce makes quick progress on his training, as the flashback scene we see in the episode Zatanna, in which he leaves Zatara the Magician to begin training with Master Yoru in Japan, takes place sometime between 1980 to 1981. Staying parked in 1981 for a second, we have a few other major events, such as Harvey Bullock joining the GCPD, Ronald Reagan becoming president on January 20th, Victor Fries first meeting his future wife Nora sometime in the summer, and the debut of Skeletor as part of the Masters of the Universe toy line.
Bring it, Skeletor.
Also Also of note, we know Amanda Waller joins the intelligence community during Reagan's administration. However, we don't have an exact date, so this could have taken place anytime between here and 1989. In 1982, Diana of Themyscira is born. Admittedly, it seems to be implied at certain moments in the series that she may be older than this, but the date is based off of comments from Justice League Unlimited writer Dwayne McDuffie. Maybe we should deep dive her history sometime soon. In May of 1983, Harvey Dent graduates high school before going off to serve in the Air Force for 2 years. Also that year, Harley Quinzel becomes a student at Gotham State University, presumably in the fall as is the usual. And towards the later half of that year, we see the flashbacks from Mask of the Phantasm play out. The next two entries are a couple more that are currently kind of floaty, but since they involve Batman existing, the earliest they can occur is 1983. Sometime between here and 1985, Batman finds himself in his final case as a solo agent, in which he comes face to face with Gotham's former protector, the bloodthirsty vigilante, the Reaper. We never see this play out on screen or in any tie-in media, so who knows what exactly happened, but judging by the fact that we never see the Reaper show back up anywhere, it seems like Bruce ran him out of town. Of course, mentioning that this was his final case as a solo agent, that means the next entry in the timeline is the flashbacks from Robin's Reckoning Part 1 and 2, in which the Flying Graysons are killed and Bruce Wayne brings Dick into the fold. While Dick is now part of the Bat family, he doesn't actually get to operate as Robin right away, and explains in an issue of Batman Adventures that the process took a whole 6 to 7 years of training, but we'll get to that in a minute. The following year, or year before, or same year, not too sure since as I said those last two were a little floaty, let's just say it's 1984. Yeah, that works. In 1984, Kunak is born. Around this time, somewhere nebulously floating around in the mid-1980s, Bruce Wayne drops out of med school, as we're told in Batman and Harley Quinn. Sometime around 1985, Amanda Waller receives her PhD, and definitely in 1985, Virgil Hawkins is born. Okay, but seriously though, if McDuffie was right about Diana's age, kind of puts Wonder Bat shipping into a new light with the possibility she's only like 3 years older than Static. Yeesh. But let's worry about that another time. Moving along, John Stewart becomes a Green Lantern around this time, somewhere between 1985 and 1990. In 1986, Tim Drake is born. Must stop thinking about Diana's age in relation to the other characters. Oh my god. Then sometime between 1986 to 1992, Miss Martian is presumably born, assuming that she is actually a teenager, as we're told in Justice League vs. the Fatal Five. In 1988 at the latest, Harold Goldblum heads up Goth Corp Chemicals R&D. May that year, Harvey Dent wins his first election as Gotham District Attorney, and shortly afterward, he begins construction on Stonegate. January 20th, 1989, George H.W. Bush begins his duties as the 41st US president, and sometime between here and 1992, Dick's training to become Robin comes to an end. This brings us into the 90s, and finally to a lot of events that we see play out on screen. So instead of giving you episode recaps when that comes up, I'll just say the events of X episode or Y comic in order to be respectful to your time. So, September 14th, 1990, Tiny Toon Adventures begins airing. In May of 1991, Harvey Dent wins his second election as Gotham District Attorney. September 25th that year, Charlie Collins' license is issued. Sometime between 1991 to 1993, Billy Batson is born, and sometime between 1991 to 1994, Harley Quinzel graduates and becomes a licensed clinical psychologist. In 1992, Edward Nygma is wrongfully terminated from Competitron after the company steals his creation, Riddle of the Minotaur. Sometime during the back half of that year, a virtually unknown member of the Volestra mob goes toe-to-toe with Batman at the Ace Chemicals plant, only to fall in a vat of chemicals and become the Joker. The events of Beware the Grey Ghost also occur this year, and on October 19th, 1992, the Grey Ghost return lands him on the cover of People magazine. Also on that magazine cover is actor Matt Hagen, who becomes Clayface shortly after during the events of Feet of Clay, which we've determined occur sometime between October 1992 and February 1993. Around this same time, between October 92 and January 93, the events of The Cat and the Claw play out, and this stretch of episode ends with the events of Zatanna, an episode for which we haven't determined the time of year, but only that it takes place in 1992. 1992 or 1993. Closing out our time in 1992, in December that year, Hamilton Hill becomes the mayor of Gotham City. In 1993, Dick Grayson likely begins his college career. Harley Quinzel runs into Bobby Leibowitz for the last time prior to their encounter in Batman and Harley Quinn, and the events of Pretty Poison takes place. For things that happened that year with more concrete time periods, January 20th, Bill Clinton begins his time as the 42nd US president, and around the same time, the events of Cat Scratch Fever take place, sometime between January and February. June 28th, a rash of chemical lab break-ins begins, with the first one taking place at Carson Pharmaceuticals. The next one is about a week later on July 3rd at Gotham Pharmaceuticals, and on July 13th, another takes place at Phoenix Pharmaceuticals, kicking off the events of On Leather Wings. Sometime after Batman first fights the Man-Bat, the Gotham City Police Department becomes more trusting of him, and the Bat Signal is added to their roof, as seen in the Cape and Cowl conspiracy. Only took 10 years of hard dedication to fighting crime in Gotham for that to happen. Of course, that trust is short-lived, as we see in the first feature film of the DCAU, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, which takes place in the tail end of 1993, sometime between September to December. Bringing 1993 to a close, we have the events of Tiger Tiger, Catwalk, and Batman Adventures number 1 through 3 taking place in December, followed by Christmas with the Joker on Christmas Eve. Our next entry, Terror in the Sky, occurs around this time as well. While it's not clear whether or not we're in late 1993 or early 1994, we do know it's around winter time due to all the snow present. Now in 1994, we have events such as the lab explosion that turns Victor Freeze into Mr. Freeze, as well as the episode If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich, and Batman Adventures number 11. In May that year, the events of Two-Face Part 1 take place, followed by Moon of the Wolf sometime between October and November, and then Two-Face Part 2 6 months after the first part, also in November. Longtime viewers will probably remember that I've said a few times that November 1994 was a very busy month for Batman. Not only because of those 2 episodes I've just mentioned, but we've determined before that this is also when he met Ra's al Ghul, Raz?
Father's name was pronounced Raish, not Raz.
In The Demon's Quest. And seen as the first episode, we, as the audience, see Raz is in Off Balance, and that episode has the giant penny. We're looking at Two-Face Part 2, Two-Face's flashback sequence from Almost Got Him, Off Balance, The Demon's Quest, and Batman Adventures number 21, all taking place within that time period. Honestly, if I were Bruce, I'd think a bat nap would be in order after all of that. Luckily, he seems to have a pretty quiet December this year, which brings us to 1995. This year gives us the events of Batman and Robin Adventures number 11. On March 17th, Charlie Collins' driver's license expires. That is, if he still even had it, seeing as the Joker took it after their run-in. In August, we get the events of Heart of Ice. In November, Ivy completes rehabilitation at Arkham and is given a clean bill of health. Then finishing out 95, we have the only story from the Batman Adventures holiday special that wasn't animated, White Christmas, taking place on December 24th. It's in continuity, Ted. Sometime between 1995 to 1996, the events of Day of the Samurai play out, and Batgirl seemingly makes her debut around this time as well. But perhaps a dive into her history is also best suited for another time. In 96, we have plenty of stories that don't seem to have a locked time period attached, such as Deep Freeze, the backstory from Batman Adventures Volume 2 number 7 titled The First Time, Batman Adventures number 17, and Batman and Robin Adventures Annual number 1. Around May that year, the events of House and Garden come to pass. Shortly afterward, by early June, Lyle Bolton is fired from Arkham, and later that month, we see Ivy has returned to Gotham as reported by Summer Gleason during the events of Lockup. The events of Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero take place over this summer, starting as early as June and ending as late as October due to the time skips within the film. Our summer ends with the infamous Dakota riots, in which Virgil Hawkins' mother is killed, despite Virgil coming back in time to save her as the superhero Static with his friends Gear and Time Zone. While it remains unclear how much of what we saw on screen actually played out, as Time Zone eventually erases her powers from ever coming to be, once they get back to the present, Mr. Hawkins tells Virgil about how his mother referred to him as her superhero that evening. So the events do seem to be intact through some sort of paradox. Reaching the tail end of the year, the events of Batgirl Returns takes place between November 12th to 21st, and the main story of Lockup picks back up in December, followed by Batman and Robin Adventures number 3 and number 5. Sometime between Christmas and New Year's, a bullet for bullet plays out, and then we close out the year with the Batman TMNT Adventures crossover comic, which mostly takes place in January, but has a few flashback sequences that would occur in December. From here, we conclude our time with Batman the Animated Series in January of 1997 with the episode Mudslide, and shortly after, Dick Grayson graduates college as seen in flashback during the episode Old Wounds, thus starting our journey through the time period known as the Lost Years. But before we hop over there, for those of you who were hoping for a Batman the Animated Series viewing order, it kinda looks something like this. Granted, that's only 29 episodes and 2 movies out of a total 85 episodes, so there's definitely a lot more ground to cover here in the future. Shifting focus to the Lost Years territory, we don't know too terribly much about this time period. Superman likely debuts during this, but we still haven't done a timeline video on his show, so we'll be sticking to what we definitely do know. On August 20th, 1997, Bruce Wayne donates $1 million to the Gotham City Orphanage. Later that year in October, Dick arrives in Santo de la Rosa for the Festival of the Dead, which we see play out in Batman Adventures The Lost Years number 3. The following month, in November, Monica Lewinsky reveals she has a dress with Bill Clinton's, you guys probably don't want to hear about this, but it's DCAU canon as confirmed by Dan Reba and Kronos' list of things to steal. So I guess if you really want to know, you can Google Lewinsky's dress, but just be warned, it's not exactly safe for work. I mean, it probably is just because it's US history, but anyway, back to Batman Adventures The Lost Years number 3. At the end of that book, we see Dick head to Tibet a year to the day after leaving Gotham, placing us in January of 1998. Also in 1998, astronaut J. Allen Carter is sent on a mission to Mars. While there, he accidentally releases these squishy alien guys that James would hate me if I called the Imperium from their imprisonment. One of the alien soldiers assumed Carter's identity and upon returning to Earth became a US senator. From there, we hop over to 1999, where Amanda Waller disappears from public life. This is likely in relation to her work with Task Force X. As we know, Captain Boomerang joins the group during spring this year. Also in spring, Superman finds Kara NZ in the remains of Argo and brings her to Earth.
Supergirl's name was pronounced NZ, not
NZ. Midway through the year, in May at the earliest, Dick Grayson returns to Gotham as seen in The Lost Years number 5 and the new Batman Adventures episode Sins of the Father. Over the summer, the events of Little Girl Lost Part 1 and 2 take place, followed shortly after by the first meeting of Batman and Superman in World's Finest and Joker's Millions a month after that. The events of Gotham Adventures number 2 occur sometime during this year after Dick's return, and by fall, Static Shock starts its run, with the Big Bang hitting Dakota during shock to the system. The Penguin begins his mayoral campaign towards the tail end of the year, in December, and we close out the 90s with Holiday Nights, an episode which has segments taking place on December 22nd, 24th, 31st, and January 1st of 2000. Now in the new millennium, things really start to get moving pretty quickly. During Spring Break 2000, the Superman the Animated Series episode Unity takes place. Sometime between April and June, Senator J. Allen Carter's disarmament plan is ratified and Superman begins disarming nuclear warheads as seen in Justice League's Secret Origins Part 1. In June, Bruce Wayne begins dating Julie Madison from the Batman Adventures Volume 2. That fall, Dick Grayson leaves for Bloodhaven as seen in Batman Adventures Volume 2 number 12's backstory, and in September, the new Batman Adventures Mean Seasons takes place, throwing another log on the Batsuit conundrum fire, because the new Batman Adventures is still taking place when Justice League has already started kicking in. And with that, we're now at the formation of the Justice League. Late in the year 2000, sometime between October and December, the Justice League forms as seen in Secret Origins. During this time period, the group goes on multiple missions together, and the episodes up through The Enemy Below take place. However, despite now being part of a larger team, Batman only commits to the League part-time due to responsibilities in Gotham. We see this playing out during the TNBA tie-in comic Batman Gotham Adventures in issues such as number 32, which firmly cement its time period in November of 2000, and again in Batman Adventures Volume 2, of which the first 10 issues take us through December of 2000 up until New Year's Eve. Simultaneously, Static is still going on superhero adventures, and a little over a year after the Big Bang, we catch back up with him around the Christmas season during the events of the episode Frozen frozen out. Also this month, over in Metropolis, the Toyman is seen writing a letter to Santa Claus in Superman Adventures number 44. In 2001, we get the events of Injustice for All, Morty and his wife visit Miami, and sometime in the early half of the year, Brainiac seems to destroy Bizarro's world, an event that we likely see take place in Superman Adventures number 44 as well. It's a whole thing, so you can just go check out our video on what happened to Bizarro's world if you want more info. In fact, if you want more info on any of this stuff, there's a whole playlist linked in the description. In June, we pick back up with volume 2 of the Batman Adventures with issues number 11 through 13. The backstory of issue number 11 specifically taking place on June 13th, and then issues number 14 through 15 also taking place sometime over that summer. Following his appearance in Batman Adventures volume 2, Temple Fugit is recruited to Task Force X, but realistically this could take place anytime between here and the summer of 2003. In addition, Billy Batson receives powers that transform him into Captain Marvel sometime between here and summer of 2003. I'm guessing it's probably further down the line as to explain why he wasn't recruited into the League during initiation, but there's not much to prove it either way. But back to things we're a little more sure about. The events of Justice League's Paradise Lost takes place during hurricane season of 2001, sometime between June and August. Static Shock's flashback plays out in September, or doesn't take place at all. I'm not too sure. This is the time travel episode I mentioned earlier. During the fall, Batman Adventures Volume 2 number 16 takes place. This is the first time we meet Alec Holland in the DCAU. And due to math from Batman and Harley Quinn, we know he becomes Swamp Thing in a laboratory explosion shortly after. Oh, and while he's temporarily deceased, Jason Woodrue takes some tubers off of his body. We also see the Joker in Batman Adventures number 16, and since he tells us that the Royal Flush Gang has stuck to his side ever since freeing them from Cadmus, the flashback from Wildcards where he does just that likely occurs around here, if not just a teeny bit later. Come Halloween, the Justice League episode A Night of Shadows takes place. Then between there and Christmas Eve, all of the episodes from Metamorphosis up to Secret Society play out. On Christmas Eve, the League pulls a National Lampoon and goes on Christmas vacation, as we see in Comfort and Joy. Oh, and look, there's Swampy. Then we close out the year with Wildcards and Starcrossed, taking place sometime between very late 2001 to early 2002. And the Static Shock episodes, A League of Their Own up till Hoop Squad, occur between November 2001 to February of 2002. Of course, following Starcrossed, the League has to regroup themselves, and while we see the results of this play out in Justice League Unlimited's initiation, there were plans for a film to bridge the gap between the two series titled Justice League Worlds Collide. That film was never produced, but the script was tweaked to become Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. And while that film doesn't fit canon, we can imagine something kind of like the events within took place in 2002. This would give explanation to Wonder Woman's invisible jet, the new Watchtower, and the start of the Justice League's expansion, as well as putting a nice bow on Jessica Cruz's camping trip that we see in Justice League vs. the Fatal Five, since we know from comics lore that her original power ring came from the crime syndicate's very own power ring. Yeah. That's the guy's name. Summer this year, the events of the Batman and Harley Quinn tie-in book, Harley Quinn and Batman, take place. Then, as I've already hinted at, the League expands as seen in Justice League Unlimited's initiation. From here, it's kind of hard to decide where the line is of what takes place in 2002 and 2003. At the very least, we know up to the return takes place in 2002, as Amazo suggests he left during Justice League's Tabula Rasa a matter of months ago. But if you ask me, I think everything up to the season 1 finale, the Once and Future Thing, took place in 2002. Yes, I know home releases of JLU list the first 26 episodes as one season, but Once and Future Thing was the actual cap-off for season 1. Don't ask me why they did it this way, I don't know, but either way, from what we've been able to gather, while never shown on screen, it seems as though Hal Jordan becomes a Green Lantern between these episodes. The Return and Once and Future Thing, those episodes. We did a whole video on it, and I'm already wasting too much time talking about it here, so just go watch that if you need to know more. My ward is a junkie? Sometime between 2002 to 2003, Barbara Gordon has a fear toxin-induced flashback following the events of the new Batman Adventures Over the Edge, and now we're caught up to the second season of JLU. Early episodes in season 2, such as The Cat and the Canary and The Ties That Bind, are also in that weird floaty is it 2002 or 2003 section. But we know for sure that summer of 2003 is when the events of the Cadmus conspiracy begin to to play out, which runs from Doomsday Sanction up until Divided We Fall. Task Force X specifically takes place on Memorial Day, and sometime between Doomsday Sanction and Clash, Captain Marvel is recruited to the League. Also this summer, Harley is released from Arkham as seen in Harley Quinn and Batman #5 following a year of good behavior, and she gets a job waiting tables at Super Babes. 3 months later, Batman and Harley Quinn takes place and is followed by another tie-in comic series, this time called Batman and Harley Quinn. The issues in this series take place mere moments to days after the movie's end, but for some reason are out of chronological order. Granted, this isn't the first time that this has happened in the DCAU, but luckily we do get timestamps this time around. Issue number 3 picks up 3 minutes after Floronic Man is set on fire, issue number 2, 2 days later, 5 days for issue number 4, 6 for number 1, and 10 days later for number 5. The only 2 issues that don't have a timestamp are issues number 6 and 7, which one can assume take place between issue number 5 and the movie's post-credit sequence in which Harley Quinn has a TV talk show. Now in spring of 2004, we've arrived at the events of Justice League Unlimited's final season, and what many assume is the end of the DCAU prior to Batman Beyond. However, that's not 100% accurate, so let's hop into that in-between time. Sometime in early 2004, Harley Quinn leaves her TV show behind and returns to crime in the pages of Batman, Harley, and Ivy. We've briefly touched on this run a handful of times, most notably a clipboard that places part of it as occurring in May, but it actually takes place over a span of time, so perhaps a timeline video on that should be in order. In September of 2004, Emerald Empress and Validus are brought back in time from the 31st century by the Legion of Superheroes and placed in holding cells on Oa. A few months later, in November, the remaining Fatal 5 members and Starboy arrive in the past. Starboy is taken to Arkham, and the time bubble occupied by the Fatal 5 is taken to a lab located in the Magan Center. Now in 2005, Robert Vance passes away from a debilitating brain disorder. His brain impulses were digitized so that he could guide the company from beyond the grave. We see this in flashback at the start of Batman Beyond's Lost Soul, and is that Dr. Arroyo from the Zeta Project? It can't be. Is that his dad? Is he an infiltration unit? What is going on here? Pretty early in the year, the plasma rifle is invented, and in February, Harley and Ivy, the motion picture, wins an Academy Award. Despite not seeing it play out, around this time, it seems as though Harley is recruited to Task Force X, since Amanda Waller promised that would happen were she to return to crime. Shortly before spring break, Mystery of the Batwoman takes place, and then in September, we get the rest of Justice League vs. the Fatal 5. Not long after, Tim Drake is kidnapped by the Joker and brainwashed through the use of Cadmus tech as seen in the Return of the Joker flashback, which can occur anytime between September 2005 to 2007. Around this time, between 2006 to 2008, Barbara has a second fear toxin flashback. That same 2006 to 2008 time period would also be when Clock King's time with Task Force X would come to an end, given that he survives that long. Deadshot's time would be over by Memorial Day 2008, and Killer Croc's time comes to an end later that year since he was part of the team in the Batman and Harley Quinn comics. Then of course, the biggest event of the entire DCAU, the near apocalypse of 2009. An event so big that we know absolutely nothing about it. That same year is also the earliest that Farmer Brown could be released from prison, but theoretically that could be anywhere between here and 2020. Provided he lasts that long, Farmer Brown was mad old. In 2012, Superman and Terry McGinnis meet during the events of Superman Adventures number 64. By 2014, nanotech becomes illegal, and in 2017, the Cybertronics Warrior is invented. June 21st, 2019 is another big one, as that's the night we're told that Bruce Wayne retires as Batman. Granted, this date comes from a comic that says the future portion of Rebirth takes place on June 21st, 2039, and that doesn't exactly work, but it's the best we've got for this, so I'm not just gonna ignore it. In 2020, Bane leaves prison to live in seclusion due to the side effects of Venom, and sometime between here and 2021, Charlie Big Time Bigelow is born. Coach Fitz begins his trophy-winning career at Hamilton Hill High School in 2021 as well, and in 2022, Dr. Corso begins his medical practice. Sometime between late June 2022 and late September 2023, Stuart Carter Winthrop III, the Joker's gang member known as Ghoul, is born, and sometime between 2023 to 2024, we get little baby Terry McGinnis. 2025 sees the closing of the Jolly Jack Candy Factory, and sometime between late June that year to late September of 2026, the Dee twins are born. Around 2026, Rosalie Rowan from the Zeta Project is born. In 2030, Tony Maycheck is doused with toxic chemicals and left for dead by his business partner Bill Wallace, leading to the creation of Earthmover. In 2031, Gotham Plastics is built, and sometime between here and 2032, Amanda Waller hires the Phantasm to kill the McGinnis family. However, Andrea ultimately decides against it. In 2034, Cairo is born, and an 8-year-old Rosalie Rowan goes to live with her foster family in Hillsburg. In 2037, Terry and Charlie Bigelow are arrested, and in 2038, the Crown of Tikal is stolen from the Mexico City Museum. And now, we're in the home stretch. Just Batman Beyond and Legion of Superheroes left to cover, so let's just blow through that as quickly as we can. In fall of 2039, Terry McGinnis takes up the mantle of Batman as seen in Rebirth Part 1 and 2. The episodes of the show play out in chronological order if following production order, so by Meltdown we're in early spring 2040, with Golem also occurring in spring shortly afterward. By the time we reach episodes like Hidden Agenda and Earthmover, we're in fall of that year. August 5th, 2041, Unit Zeta went renegade. 6 days later, he shows up in Gotham during the events of Batman Beyond episode Zeta. By the time we get to Plague, it's now spring of 2042. The episodes from Untouchable up to Out of the Past all seem to take place during summer that year, with the feature-length movie Batman Beyond Return of the Joker taking place that summer as well, in between King's Ransom and Out of the Past. The rest of the show plays out through the tail end of 2042, with a few episodes potentially bleeding into 2043. Then, in the early 2050s, David Clinton invents time travel, kinda, and goes back in time, causing the events of the Once and Future Thing to occur. This timeline is erased, and then he's put into a time loop. The events of Justice League Unlimited's epilogue takes place in 2054. In 2462, Booster Gold leaves the future, and in 2979, the future portions of the Superman the Animated Series episode The New Kids in Town play out. Over 20 years later, we're now in the 31st century, circa 3004, and the future portions of Far From Home occur, despite the Legion not aging, so, you know, not canon! Then shortly afterward, Emerald Empress and Validus are captured by the Legion of Superheroes and sent to the past as prisoners on Oa, and the remaining members of the Fatal Five steal a time sphere and return to the past. And that's everything we know. Obviously, we still have some things to pin down. For instance, timeline videos on Superman the Animated Series and the Zeta Project are still necessary, as well as the handful of Batman episodes we've yet to place. Will it canon videos to determine what comics, games, and books do and don't work? The list is pretty massive, which brings me to that important message I mentioned earlier. For the moment, this is the final episode of The Vanishing Point. While we all love the show, it's gotten to a point where it's just a bit of a hindrance. Just to give you guys a bit of a peek beneath the hood, every VP episode that we put out essentially starts with me freaking out, not knowing what to do a deep dive on, picking a random character, followed by watching and reading all of their DCAU appearances. Oftentimes, this leads to a dead end, and I have to switch focus, which could potentially lead to another dead end, etc. Then there's the fact that I mostly try to stick within the scope of shows we've already done timeline videos for, and that have extra tie-in material that helps flesh things out. For the most part, this has left me pigeonholed to Batman Beyond, the League shows, and Batman the Animated Series, which I know we haven't done a timeline video for BTAS, but with all of the episodes being out of timeline order, that's kind of part of the point of this. But this ends up pushing shows like Static, Superman, and Zeta to the side. Not to mention, being the channel's timeline guy, the time crunch that the current setup puts me under has made it difficult to even properly sit down and figure out Superman and Zeta. We were talking about trying to squeeze out a few more episodes to bring things around to a full 2 years, but on top of all of that, at the time this video goes live, I'll have moved apartments and won't have access to this set anymore, which is why the entire middle section of this video was done in narration rather than me sitting behind the desk. Now, I don't want any of you to get the wrong idea. I'm not leaving the channel by any means. We're simply in the middle of reassessing the way we have things structured and trying to shake it all out to where we aren't all always stressed and on time crunches to do all of the things that need to be done for each video. Actually, we've got a lot of really cool stuff coming up in the new year that we've been trying to plot out for the last few months that I think James may want to talk to you guys about.
Hey everybody, this video is already quite long, so I'll keep this as brief as possible. I know it seems like everything about the channel is like going away all of a sudden. The 12th Level Intellects podcast ended a few weeks ago. Ted just recently announced he's only doing a few more graphic content episodes, and now whether you realized it or not, you've been watching the final episode of The Vanishing Point. But like Maddie already touched on a little bit, these are changes that we're working through for the betterment of the YouTube channel. When we started this thing, there was no real guideline for what we were supposed to do, and there still still isn't really. Just like every other YouTuber, we're basically constantly figuring this out as we go. The Vanishing Point obviously means a lot to Maddie and myself. I think bringing Maddie onto the channel in general was a big boon. To have another big DCAU nerd among me and Ted to help us figure out where to go with anything and to help us break out of the mold and try new video styles. And of course, Maddie's not going away, but the Vanishing Point, I think, was something really special. And we've all really learned a lot about working as a team to make a bunch of stupid Batman videos, but we couldn't have done it without all of you who are watching, and that's why we want to make sure that the channel continues to be something that you want to come back and watch all the time, because it's whatever day it is. So to that end, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of give you a brief idea of what our plans are going into 2020. The goal is to have a new video out every Sunday. A lot of the time that's going to be our video essay style stuff, like timeline videos or Will It Canon or casting call, fan theories, all the stuff that you've come to want from us, including topics that would normally probably be covered by Vanishing Point episodes, just not in the Vanishing Point format, not 100% anyway. And sometimes they're going to be stuff like us playing video games or interviews with DCAU cast and crew, but the goal is to not let a Sunday go by without something for you to watch, and maybe that'll become Saturdays. I don't know. Stick around, you'll find out. In addition, we're planning to bring back the podcast sometime within the first quarter of this year as a live video show. Me and Maddie in the same physical location, probably with Ted as some sort of Arnim Zola type computer screen sitting in the middle of us, because he lives in the far off land of North Carolina. I don't have a lot of details on that yet, but keep an eye out. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. I really want to thank everybody who sent in a video of themselves singing the Vanishing Point theme song, saying because it's Thursday, and a couple other people you'll see here in just a minute. When we started the Vanishing Point, there was no way to know that it would become one of the more popular segments on the channel, and it's really great to see that it's reached so many people that I don't even know who you are. I just opened my email and like, oh, there's some guy singing the Vanishing Point theme. It really means a lot that any of you watched it ever, so it's really great. Thank you. Oh, and we're planning on wrapping up the storyline that we've been putting through a lot of our Sunday videos within the next few months, and I think that's gonna be really special too. We put a lot of thought into how this all works and goes together, probably too much thought, but it's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait for everybody to see the conclusion. So anyway, that's it from me. Look out for all the new stuff on the channel coming very soon, and now back to the basement.
Of course, before I go, I want to give a shout out to all of these lovely people who have helped support us on Patreon this month. All the support that you guys have given us through the past few years that we've been doing this has been immensely appreciated. If you'd like to support us as we make our way through the channel revamp, you can head over to patreon.com/DCAU Watchtower for information on how to do that. While you're there, be sure to check out all of the perks because there's a lot of cool stuff going on. With all of that being said, I've been Maddie Washburn, and this has been The Vanishing Point. Thanks for being you.
Hey, this is James Harvey from the World's Finest Online. You might know me as Jim. I just want to give a little bit of a shout out to the Watchtower Database's Vanishing Point. It's an incredible series that has answered questions we never knew we wanted and has found these amazing connections throughout the DCAU. It's an incredible piece of work. The knowledge on display is staggering. Can't wait to see what they're going to come up with next.
Ewan from What Culture here, and yeah, just well done to DCAU Watchtower. Vanishing Point has been one of my favourite shows that you guys do, and yeah, I'm sad to see it go, but I'm wishing you all the best for the future. I'm sure you're going to absolutely kill it with all sorts of different stuff to come, so yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maddie, James, and Ted for all of your amazing, detailed, and entertaining videos. You've saved our asses more than once on the podcast with all your DCAU knowledge. And though we're sad to see the Vanishing Point go, we cannot wait for you to keep making videos, and we'll watch them every Sunday. So from Chris and Cameron at the Tim Talk Podcast, thank you. Love you guys.
Well, hello there. Hi, I'm Cal. And I'm Liam. And we are the DCAU Review, which is a podcast you can hear weekly at DCAUreview.com. And with that shameless bit of self-promotion out of the way, we wanted to bid a very fond farewell to Maddie and the rest of the team at the Watchtower Database for Vanishing Point, which is coming to the end. We know there will still be great stuff coming out right here on this YouTube channel, but for this show, a show that's been such a source of inspiration and content and a great resource for us as well when we're doing our show. We knew we had to give a very special, fond farewell to you. Liam, is this the vanishing point for Vanishing Point? Oh my god. So meta. I love Vanishing Point because I always knew what day it was. Do you know why? Because it was Thursday. Because it's Thursday. Now I'll not know what day it is. I don't know what's gonna happen. What do we do? I don't know. But thank you, Maddie, from the bottom of our hearts, seriously, for all the hard work that you put into everything. The timeline itself and figuring out who goes where and who doesn't match up with who and why this person is related or not related to that person. Will it canon? Oh wait. Different show. Different show. Okay, never mind. We're so thankful for it, and like we said, as an invaluable resource to us for the work that we do on our podcast, the DCAU Review. Absolutely. Thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.
Hey, folks. Jay of Jay's Reviews here. Just saying that Vanishing Point was a great show and will be missed. Maddie's research skills are really commendable, and that really came in handy when doing my own videos on the DCAU. In fact, I even edited for it for a brief bit, so shout out to James for putting up with my incompetence. Thankfully, on this channel, we live in the timeline where we're all friends here. On the other timeline, the schmuck version of me is dealing with James in the program, so I guess I'll get back to dealing with that now. But in all seriousness, the Vanishing Point really will be missed. It wasn't a very good time period in my life when I first met the Watchtower Database guys, but they showed me friendship and I really value that. So every other week, I always look forward to seeing a new video because it was Thursday.
Thank you guys for everything.
Hey guys, for those of you who don't recognize me, I'm Matty Washburn. I've been on here a couple times doing timeline related videos. James wants me to start doing this new show that we're calling The Vanishing Point. I wonder if he can make the words come in. Oof.
I just need to let you all know that SR Striker was right. We all need to listen to SR Striker. Everything he's been saying has been correct. The Vanishing Point is ending. Follow the breadcrumbs, follow the trail, follow everything that SR Striker said, okay?